Hello, everybody. We're going to talk about the Athenian democracy. This is really the place where the democratic idea is first tried out on a whole population. Of course, there were probably smaller examples of democratic ongoings in little units, family units, tribal, clan, whatever. But this is the first time an organized polity, an organized political system of a state, of course, is the Greek city-states, but a state actually has a political system that is based on democratic rule. But it doesn't just happen overnight, and it doesn't happen all at once. There are many stages to it. There are a lot of people involved. There's a lot of back and forth that goes on. And there's some terms that you're going to have to learn. So the first thing I would like to do before we go any further is to just go through some of the key players that you're going to need to know about and some of the key terms. All right, first, Draco. This guy is, you'll recognize his name possibly from the word draconian. Somebody say, that's a really draconian law or a draconian approach, and it means something harsh or unforgiving. Well, that's where it comes from. Draco was the guy who was given the responsibility of giving this oral law into a written form and then also assigning the penalties. And the penalties he assigned were, in a word we will use today, draconian. And we'll go into that more later. The next one is Solon. Solon is the first archon. And archons, by the way, are the people who are in charge in Athens. They are the, from the time that we start to pick up their written record, they are basically what has replaced kings. They're local magistrates. They're elected, sort of. And Solon is one of the archons, and the first one that really starts to make some changes in favor of a democratic system, or at least a system that is more representative of the people. Next one is Pisistratos. Pisistratos takes things a step further. He was a very popular-minded person. He begins the Athenic Games, the Pan-Athenic Games. These are basically like the Olympic Games, but just for Athens. Like the Olympic Games, they were done every 4 years. Some people say they were just kind of a way for the people of Athens to sort of identify who their key representatives were going to be in the Hellenistic wide, that is the Pan-Greek or Pan-Hellenistic Olympic Games. Okay, next one is Cleisthenes. Cleisthenes is the person that most historians refer to as the father of Athenian democracy. He is the first person who really set forth to try and create a truly democratic system. That is to say, a system in which the elected officials of the city were elected by the people as a whole, not just by a few aristocratic individuals. Now, a thing to keep in mind, when we say the people as a whole, we're talking the citizens. And citizenship was narrowly defined. They had to be men over 20 years of age. They had to be free, because slavery was very much a part of Greek society. And they had to be property owners. That is to say, they had to have enough wealth to be able to put together a suit of armor and weapons so that they could at least theoretically serve in the military. Many of them never did, but they had to be able to. They had to be able to purchase the military equipment needed to do this. This was not cheap, and it wasn't able to be used for anything else, so you had to have some means in order to be able to do this. So what this means is that the citizens, the voting citizens, became an ever smaller slice of the population until you get down to this group of people. But it was still a significant group of people. Probably 30 to 60,000 Athenians were qualified to be citizens around the peak of the democracy, of the Athenian democracy in about the 4th century. So, or I'm sorry, the 5th century, 400s. So this was a fairly significant population, and even at 30 to 60,000, it's a significant departure from anything else that had ever existed in the world. That many people voting on leadership and their own governance. Next one that I'd like to that we need to look at is Epiphanes. He was another archon. He also instituted a lot more reforms, and he really expanded the democracy and created what we now think of as the radical democracy. This is the democracy at the peak of the Athenian democratic experiment. And before we go a whole lot further, we actually need to take a step backwards and look at a guy named Helen. Yes, a man named Helen. Kind of like a boy named Sue, right? The man named Helen, for those of you who are less than my age, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. An old Johnny Cash song, A Boy Named Sue. Doesn't matter. Anyway, the man named Helen is the mythological father of the Greeks. And that's why when we talk about Greek civilization, we talk about Hellenistic or Hellenic civilization or Hellenic practices or Hellenic culture or Hellenistic culture. That's these terms are interchangeable. That's because the Greek term for themselves are the Helena, coming from this man's name, Helen. Now, that's not to be confused with Helen of Troy. Helen of Troy was an entirely different person. Helen of Troy her name actually doesn't have anything to do with the hero Helen. Her name is probably taken from a word for the moon or a torch, some other thing that illuminates the darkness. And that's a reference to her beauty. She was, according to the mythology, the most beautiful woman in the world. And so when you think of Hellenism, don't think of Helen of Troy. Different story, different meaning, different connection. But Helen, from whom the Greeks take their own name, was a man. All right. Next person you need to know, Philip II. He was the first king of Macedonia to really start unifying the peninsula, the whole Greek peninsula. And, of course, his son, everybody knows, Alexander the Great. So these are some of the key people that you'll need to know. Other people will play parts, such as the Caesars, the governors that are put in place. But these are all the key people that you need to know about.